99.9% of the musicians sat in their room, picked a hero, and emulated it.
Joni Mitchell never needed a spotlight to be seen. She was the quiet fire in a smoky room, the poet in a world of performers. With a voice like wind through stained glass and lyrics that bled truth, she stood apart, fragile, fierce, and unapologetically honest. The world saw her as an icon, but behind the applause and album covers was a woman who remembered, who carried every betrayal like a chord unresolved, every shallow compliment, every stolen melody, every artist who misunderstood the weight of her words and turned her art into something she didn't recognize. She never exploded in interviews. She didn't rant on stage. She just spoke, with precision, with pain, with a clarity that cut deeper than any headline ever could. And when Joni Mitchell called you out, it didn't sound like anger, it sounded like disappointment. Now, in the autumn of her life, Joni's truths are finally being heard without filter, about the stars who mimicked her, misrepresented her, or stood for everything she fought against. Some of them are legends. A few were once friends, but once they crossed the line, Joni never looked back. These are the 5 artists who, in her eyes, lost the soul of music. And the quiet, devastating things she said when the mic was off, and the masks came off too. Because for Joni Mitchell, art wasn't just sound. It was sacred, and not everyone deserved to hold it. Taylor Swift, the high cheekbones and hollow notes. She said she was inspired by Joni, told magazines how Joni's music shaped her, even tried to play her in a biopic. But when Joni Mitchell heard about the casting, she didn't smile. She shut it down with one line that echoed like a slap. All they had was a girl with high cheekbones. To fans it felt cruel. To Joni it was truth. Taylor Swift, in her eyes, was all surface, gloss without grit. A mirror of the modern music machine that Joni spent decades resisting. Joni didn't just reject Taylor the actress. She rejected what Taylor represented, an industry obsessed with packaging instead of purpose. And when asked about Taylor's music, Joni confessed she hadn't heard it, not out of pride, but because deep down she already knew what she'd find. Polished production, marketable vulnerability, a formula wrapped in eyeliner and perfectly timed heartbreaks. Joni believed in songs as sacred things, stories soaked in pain, reflection, and unfiltered emotion. Taylor's fame, her fanfare, her world tours, and carefully crafted albums? That wasn't the art Joni fought for. It was theater. And yet, the irony lingers. Taylor's folklore, her battle for music ownership, those were the kinds of wars Joni might have once admired. But by then the disconnect was too deep. The judgment had been made. Quietly, firmly. Taylor never fired back. She never got the approval she wanted. Just silence. The kind that speaks louder than applause. Judy Collins, the song that didn't sound like her. Before the fame, before the Grammys, before anyone knew the name Joni Mitchell, there was a voice, Judy Collins' voice, singing Joni's words. Both sides now became a hit. It played on radios around the world, and people loved it. But Joni didn't. Not because Judy stole her spotlight, not because of envy, but because to Joni that song wasn't just a song, it was a memory wrapped in melody, a piece of her heart. And when Collins sang it, Joni felt it had been smoothed over, sweetened, softened into something it was never meant to be. She once said Judy's version lacked the pain, the vulnerability, the emotional weight she had poured into the lyrics. And worst of all, people started to believe Judy had written it. That hurt more than the fame, more than the charts. It felt like her story had been taken and handed to someone else. When Judy later said, Joni should have just said thank you, it was like pouring salt in a wound. Because Judy saw a hit, Joni saw a betrayal. To Collins it was art. To Mitchell it was theft, not of credit, but of meaning. Joni never screamed about it, never fought in public. She just pulled away, quietly, purposefully. And behind that silence lived a disappointment she never truly let go of. Because for Joni, the worst thing an artist can do isn't steal your song. It's strip it of its soul. John Lennon, The Coldest Room in L.A. They were both legends in their own right. Joni Mitchell, the soul-bearing poet of Laurel Canyon. John Lennon, the sharp-tongued visionary who shook the world with a chord and a quote. When they met in the 1970s, it should have been a meeting of minds. Instead, it was a collision of worlds. Lennon was deep into his lost weekend, a period marked by excess, detachment, and emotional chaos. He was loud, surrounded by noise and drink, while Joni remained quiet, watchful, absorbing everything. She didn't see brilliance in his chaos. She saw armor, a man hiding behind wit and walls, daring anyone to get close. Joni said he was cold, defensive, dismissive. They didn't argue, they simply didn't connect. But what lingered with her most wasn't just the awkwardness. It was what she saw beneath his bitterness. A man still fighting ghosts of class and ego, using sarcasm to mask how small he sometimes felt. Lennon came from working-class Liverpool. Joni from humble beginnings in Canada. But she grew into art, into words that bled. He had become a symbol, maybe even a myth. And that night, she saw someone who couldn't stomach people who weren't playing the same loud game. He saw her as middle class. She saw him as wounded, and neither forgave the other. Joni didn't talk much about Lennon afterward, just a few lines here and there. Enough to know their encounter left a bruise. Not a brawl, not a scandal, just a quiet fracture between two people too different to share the same air. And when asked what went wrong, Joni never blamed his fame or his past. She just said, "We didn't click." Sometimes that says everything. Bob Dylan, The Mask. She refused to wear. At first, she admired him. Who didn't? Bob Dylan was the high priest of folk rebellion, the poet with a harmonica, the man who made protest sound like prophecy. Joni Mitchell once called him an influence, a spark that pushed her to dig deeper, write braver. But admiration soured. With time, the myth of Dylan began to bother her. The hats, the voices, the shifting identities. 1 minute a preacher, the next a cowboy, then a rocker. To the world it was genius. To Joni it was theater. She said it plainly. Bob is not authentic at all. She didn't mean his lyrics weren't clever or his legacy wasn't massive. She meant he was wearing a mask, borrowed voices, stolen postures, a man selling truths that weren't his to tell. For someone like Joni, whose music was her diary, her confessions, her raw skin on vinyl, that kind of performance felt like betrayal. In one brutal interview, she dismissed his musicianship altogether, said his breath was rotten, his guitar work unimpressive, not out of malice, but out of disillusionment. And yet, the contradiction lingered. Joni wasn't even her real name. She was born Roberta Joan Anderson. But in her mind, Joni was still her. Dylan, she felt, was just a character. Their feud wasn't about charts or competition. It was about philosophy. Joni believed in art that bled. Dylan, to her, played dress-up with pain. She never yelled. She didn't feud the way tabloids like. She simply told the truth as she saw it. And for Bob Dylan, the verdict was this: a brilliant writer with someone else's face. Madonna, the glitter that blinded the soul. Of all the stars Joni Mitchell ever critiqued, none felt more like a personal affront to her values than Madonna. Not because Madonna lacked talent or power or influence. Joni saw all of that, but because in Madonna she saw a future of music that made her ache. She called it burlesque. She called it a circus. She said music had turned into a parade of glitter and skin and shock value. And at the center of that parade was Madonna, waving the flag. Joni wasn't scandalized by the sex appeal. She was disheartened by the emptiness. In her words, Madonna was a living Barbie doll, but a little on the blue side. Beautiful, hollow, and vaguely tragic. A symbol, not a storyteller. A movement, not a message. It wasn't just the videos or the choreography. It was the way Madonna sold empowerment, as if it came in fishnets and fire. Joni didn't see power in provocation. She saw loneliness, performance, a dangerous lie told to a generation of young women. Be loud, be bold, be seen, and that's enough. But for Joni, it was never enough. Not without depth, not without honesty, not without wounds in the melody. She once said the real danger wasn't Madonna's fame. It was her influence, that she saw herself as a role model, and the industry let her. It's death to all things real, Joni said. Because for her, every time a shallow icon replaced a soul singer, a piece of music's heart died. To fans, Madonna shattered ceilings. To Joni, she shattered mirrors, ones that used to reflect truth. And so, she never embraced her, never softened her words, never played the industry's game of smiles and sound bites. Because in Joni's world, image fades. But art is forever, and she was never going to let the glitter bury it.